welcome back to Black Swan Outdoors. Today we are going to talk about canoe camping and how to pack for a canoe camping trip. So there is plenty of different types of packs out there that I've seen on the water that people use for canoe camping. Duffel bags, internal frame packs, I've even seen wheelie suitcases. But by far the best pack for a canoe outing is the Duluth pack, or the Duluth style pack like this one here, made by Granite Gear. The reason why these packs are so great is that they can sit upright as it is right now, and that's fantastic in a boat where you want to keep the contents, the opening, up out of any potential water in the boat. And you want to make sure that there's a nice flap here that's going to protect from any spray. But it also gives the ability to shift weight in your canoe fore and aft in the trim and side to side. And so that really helps in being able to do some weight management and getting the balance right in your boat. Second to that is that if you are going on a multiple day trip, you can pack several of these in the tight fit of the canoe. And again, be able to maneuver and access the gear as needed when in the water. So there's a lot of different reasons that you would want a Duluth pack. So if you are looking for a good pack, you can certainly do that. The thing that I like to do myself too is when we're doing car camping is to use my canoe camping gear and keep it packed in the pack ready to go. And what I find is that the canoe pack actually sits nice in the back of my vehicle as well, much better than an internal frame pack would. So in a canoe, the internal frame pack is going to lay down. If you have to portage your boat, it can be difficult depending on the height of that internal frame pack. So they're a good stand-in. I see a lot of people using duffel bags. Again, a decent bag, especially kind of more of a waterproofed duffel bag that they have that sits low. But it can be hard to carry over land if you need to portage. So certainly you want to find the pack that actually fits you the best for the style of canoe camping you have. If you're not doing a lot of portaging, then you might not see the benefit in the Duluth pack as much. But I would argue that if you use a Duluth pack, it's hard to go back to anything else. So I'm not going to do a gear review. I'm just going to go through the contents. But I will say, when you're looking for a Duluth pack, there's a couple different styles. One is a more modern style that has some different modern features, and the other is more of a traditional style, which is basically like a canvas bag with a flap. Oftentimes they're just made of leather, but you can get them in Cordura as well. So I opted for a more of a modern featured bag that has cinching straps on the side. Of course, built out of Cordura, as you can see. It's got straps pretty much all over the place, places where you can mount additional gear. And then I do like to be able to take out the hip belt as well. It's got a nice pack frame and kind of chassis on here. You can adjust your shoulder straps to distribute your weight when you're going up and down hills, and then of course, a nice sturdy grab handle to pull the pack out of the boat, and also to hang it from a tree if you need to make it like a makeshift bear bag, and then of course side handles as well. So lots of features. Again, I don't want to, and then the water bottle pockets on the outside, which I like. So I don't necessarily need to go into all the details of this. If you do want a gear review on this, I don't do gear reviews, but if you do want a gear review on this or any of the other items, please let me know, and I'll go ahead and do a gear review on those specific things, or if you have some questions. But what I'm going to try to do in this series is to kind of break down some of the gear that I use and go through why I use it, and that should be hopefully maybe enough for you to decide on what you might need to add or take out of your packing system. So without too much more further ado, because this is going to be a longer video, I'm just going to go through the contents of this bag, how I pack it, why I packed it, what I've packed, and why. So before I jump into that, real quickly, I want to say this pack is big enough for a solo trip or even with two people. I can pack this gear down so that I can put all the food and gear that I would need for myself for a week-long trip in Canada or the Boundary Waters. Not a problem with this pack size. With two people, it does get a little tight, but you can make that happen, especially if you have another day pack that you can access. Um, the more traditional style of packing, especially with a larger group, is to have multiple bags and have one designated as your food pack. Oftentimes, there's special design packs that are called the number fives, or rated or numbered as a number five. And the five is going to be kind of a cube shaped so that you can put a box in there. That's going to give you some more rigidity. You put all of your food in that one bag. You can put a frozen jug in there if you want to keep stuff cold. That bag could potentially also go up into the tree as a bear bag in itself. So the second pack that you would carry then would be a gear bag. And that's basically how I have this pack configured right now. And then any additional packs that you would have would be personal packs. And so you'd have 2 people per personal pack. So if you were multiple people in a float trip, there would be 1 pack for every canoe. That would be personal gear shared, and then 1 gear pack, and then 1 food pack. An alternative way of doing this would be to scatter strategically the crew gear and food amongst the personal packs. That way, if you were to lose a pack, or for some reason your party gets separated from each other, then you have one group has part of the cook kit, part of the tent, so they can do some makeshift cooking and building makeshift shelters as an alternative. So there's just kind of different theories on how you would want to do that. Second would be that in some conditions you might want to tie your gear into your boat. So you want straps and the capacity to do that, especially on rivers where it might be harder to retrieve your gear. In a lake or a calmer water, it's just easier and safer just to keep it all unstrapped so that these packs fall out. The reason why I'm saying that is you want to think about how you pack in case you do capsize, so that you know what you might potentially lose, but also what might make a rescue much more difficult. So if you've got a lot of shit hanging off the side of your pack, it can make it very hard to get those packs back into the boat if you're say you're doing a canoe over canoe rescue. So you want to make sure that you keep the pack and the outside of the pack as slim and sleek as possible, and also consider the fact that you don't want your packs so heavy that it becomes very hard to retrieve and get those packs back into your boat if you had to do that. As I said, this is a pack is configured primarily for either canoe camping or car camping, and it's going to have all of my kind of crew gear in it and my tent. And when I'm canoe camping versus backpacking, I like to take some more luxury items with me to make it more comfortable. Backpacking, I like to go as slim and as light as possible. But if it's a leisure canoe trip and I'm not worrying about weight as much, then I can extend some of the gear. So I can bring extra things like chairs. I could bring a lantern. I could bring a larger, like a 3-person tent instead of a 2-person tent with 2 people, for example. If I wanted to, I could pack like a backpacker and slim things down, simplify my cook kit so that I'm only eating dehydrated meals, get a smaller tent, and kind of really slim down the equipment here. So what I thought when I did the video was I would do kind of what I call my luxury camping, with all the luxury features, and then you as the viewer can decide whether you want to slim back or not. I always like to pack as light as I possibly can regardless and not go too overboard. I have been on a few trips where we had some canoe damage, and we needed to hitchhike out. I've had trips where we had to unexpectedly portage over. So you don't want to just because you're in a boat think that you can just weight it down with as much weight and as much stuff as you want. That stuff becomes a very, very big issue when the emergency strikes. So, it becomes a liability. So it's best just to kind of keep things as simple as possible, as light as possible, but know that you have some more, you have some liberties that you can take advantage of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpack my pack, as I said, and go through this. And I'm going to talk about the different packing systems that I have in place. And then I'll probably do some specific videos on the different kits. So I'm not going to go into great detail on those specific kits. I'll do subsequent videos on breaking down those specific kits to make things a little simpler. So on the outside of my pack here, I have a water bottle in the water bottle pocket. Certainly something super handy to have as you're paddling. If it's a gear pack or personal pack, then I would put all my personal items like raincoat and things like that on the top that I'd have access to that I might need throughout the day. I like to keep my woods tools on the outside of my pack as well. So you see I have here is just a small handsaw. Alternative to this would be just a larger bow saw. Most of the time, especially if it's just a small group of people, this is plenty for me. I have brought and do use a larger bow saw every once in a while. And then an axe. Now, certainly, an axe is not something that everybody, or that I would recommend everyone to have. It takes some special training and skill to know how to use an axe. In fact, a smaller hand axe or hatchet or camp axe are probably one of the most dangerous items that you can pack with you, especially if you're not familiar with how to use them. So I definitely discourage newer campers or people who are not very familiar with axes. If you do want to bring an axe, or you would like to bring one, what I would recommend is what's called a boy's axe, which is a longer handle. And that longer handle, it gives a little bit longer reach. And that longer reach brings with it an element of safety and protection to a newer user. Without the weight and length of a full-size axe. So you can do pretty much most of it. The compromise, of course, would be this Granfirst Brooks axe, which is fairly expensive and kind of a specialty axe, and not something that I would recommend for someone who is newer to woods tools. So we'll talk more about that at another time. So as we're going through the pack here, I'm going to set it down on my chair. And I'm going to open up the flap. So right at top, what I like to keep on the very top of the pack are my lines for my boat. Not always, I don't always keep rope in the boat itself. In a river trip or a place where I think I might need the rope, I'll at least have at least one line out and tied as a painter line, or have it accessible at my seat. It makes for a good throw rope if you need it. Makes for a good line in case you're going through upstream, for example, and you're lining. Lots of different uses for rope. I like 20-ish feet of rope-ish. Doesn't have to be too long, but I can always tie the two pieces of rope together if I do need a longer rope. But at least, especially on a day trip, I bring at least one coil of rope. And then these are not coiled, actually, I should say. They're stacked, so I can they won't tangle if I have to throw them. Second up is a first aid kit. This is way bigger than anyone would need on a typical weekend trip. I have some special first aid training in wilderness first aid, so I have some tools in here that not everybody might find useful on a wilderness trip. And again, I might slim this down even more, or if it's a larger trip and I'm going with more people, adding more supplies to it. So one of the things about first aid kits is people kind of have a rotisserie chicken perspective to first aid kits. You kind of set it and forget it, don't use it, don't go, use it much, don't refer back to it. I like to make sure that I'm staying on top of expiration dates, making sure I have enough of equipment inside here, making sure if there was some moisture that there's no mildew or anything like that that might be with my first aid kit. But again, this is way larger than what most people want, but you know, I think it's fine for a larger group. I think it would be fine to have enough supplies to help people. I also note that in your personal gear that you have, in my opinion, if you're canoeing with me, I would prefer people to have their own personal first aid kit. So if they get cuts and need aspirin, things like that, they can dip into that first before we get into the group first aid kit for more serious or longer term situations. Okay, so again, right at top as well, think that you might need is a water purification device to purify any water. So again, I want to keep that on top so I can get through that as we stop for lunch. We need more water. One of the things that I see a lot of people not do is pad their filter, and I think that's really important. So I have this case that's padded, designed for anything from lenses to whatever. And the idea here is that if I drop this, it's all nice and padded, and I don't have to worry about cracking the plastic housing and then losing my filter, essentially. You can get around not using a padded case like this by padding it in clothing or other items with you as well. But certainly you want to think about that, and I'll talk about this particular kit specifically, like as I said before. All right, next up on top is an actual throw rope. This is something that if I'm in rushing water, running water, fast water, something that I'm actually going to have with me ready to go in the canoe. For a more of a lake trip, I still might take this and use this as part of like an extra bear bag or a clothing line. I think rope tends to be pretty handy. I didn't go out and buy a special throw rope specifically for throwing, which you can get. This is just a stacked rope in a stuff sack with a carabiner, and I call that good enough. But that's just me. It's just kind of a cheap way to do that. Also, right on top is your tarp. Depending on the size of the trip that I'm going to depending on the size of the trip will dictate the size of the group tarp that I'm going to pack. I like a 10 by 10 in a larger group, and then I'll go with something like a two-person tarp. I forget the exact size of this one, for a short backpacking trip, or as an alternative to a tent for backpacking, or for my canoe trips. So the reason why it's on top is this is when you get to camp, this is the first thing that you're going to set up before you do anything. Before you collect firewood, set up your tents. You want to make sure your group dining fly is up first. And this is also going to be the last thing down. So that way if you get caught in rain, then you have some shelter before you get into the water, onto the water. And then also on top, if you need cover during a lunch break or a storm, then you can pull this out and quickly get to that. And then lastly, for any kind of first aid situation, if you needed a tarp to protect a patient, then you could do that with your tarp very quickly. So first in, first out is always the tarp. All right. Next up here, I've got the fly for my tent. This is a 3-person tent. I've got a bear bag rope system, and more rope. So again, if it's a smaller group, if the packs aren't super heavy, if I'm not bringing a lot of different packs or lots of stuff, just a small line is going to be adequate, especially work in conjunction with my boat lines. But in with a larger group, you're definitely going to want to have a dedicated packing system. That way, if you need to put multiple packs up into a tree, you can do that with your subsequent ropes. This one is designed with pulleys on it, and a clasp. So I have 2 ropes and a pulley. I have a bear bag, and then the pulley system. So I can use that mechanical advantage to get a heavier pack into the tree. So again, if you needed to do this, if you're in bear country, then you have the supplies to do it. If I wanted a skimp, I would not take the bear bag, the rope. All right. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier, I have a large map case. This one's specifically for canoeing. So I have that on the top as well. That kind of fell down in there. I have a Frisbee. Frisbee is an awesome thing to have on the top if you need to take a break while you're having lunch. You can use it as a makeshift bailer to bail out water. You can use it as a makeshift paddle if you need to. You can use it to collect berries. You can use it to fan a fire as a bellows. You can use it as a makeshift plate for when you're cooking, or a cutting board. So there's a lot of uses actually for a Frisbee. So I like to keep that at the top. Again, it's more of a luxury item. A water bag of some kind. I like these, I think it's 2.5 quart size. You can go with the bigger ones, but I find it takes longer to fill. I would rather take one smaller water bag and then 2 additional Nalgene bottles instead of one big bag. Again, it to me, it just seems like it's a lot easier, more flexible. One thing I learned from canoeing legend Cliff Jacobson was taking two 2 quart bottles and using that for mixing. So if you've got things that are from the grocery store, like drink mixes that are designed for 2 quarts, like a 2 quart pitcher, then trying to figure out how much to powder you would need, and trying to find some, it just makes it easier to mix 2 quarts up at the same time. And that's actually quite helpful. I always mark one as mix and one as water. So if one bottle is designated straight as water, then I always have one that's always straight water. So I'll have 2 additional water bottles for myself. So that's 4 quarts of water plus the water bag, plus the other people with me canoeing will have an additional 1 or 2 quarts of water as well. So again, that's plenty of water, I think, for most trips. If I'm going on a river trip where I'm not going to be filtering water, then I'll get one of those big square water containers. And especially if I'm canoeing with somebody who's lighter, I'll go with one big container for the entire trip, not have to treat the water, and then use that for weight displacement in the canoe to get the front end of the canoe down. So in wind or with a light paddle in the front, I can manage my weight appropriately. All right, I've got this bag here, which is my food bag, my kitchen. I've got the other half of my tent. Again, it's ready to go, separated, so that I can divvy this up if I needed to. If we're going with two different people or 2 different boats, 2 groups, my tent is already separated. It also packs easier when I keep it separate. The alternative to keeping your tent in a stuff sack is not to use a stuff sack and just cram everything in there. I've done that on a few trips. I don't mind doing that at all. But this is a 3-person, 4-season tent. So it's bomber in wind. It's very spacious. And then I have inside here then the ground cloth, the poles, stakes, skylines, and pretty much everything you would need for that. So again, I can slim this down immensely if I choose the right tent. So I have a lot more room to put food, clothing, other things in there if I don't go with that big tent. All right, then fairly up on top is my cat hole bag. So this is everything that you need to use the restroom, to go to the bathroom out in the woods. So this is an additional kit which we'll go into as well. Poles for the tent, 2 camping chairs, so 2 folding style camping chairs.